More than 2,000 years ago, the Egyptian civilization was a history and a mysterious conquest, even for researchers and historians at the time. They wrote in their books about a civilization that spanned for more than 3,000 years, but the Greek geography and historian Strabo revealed in the 1st century of birth that will be one of the secrets of the ancient world underground. He referred to him in a place similar to the sand dunes and said, when you encounter the luminous black lions next to each other. Subscribe to the channel. The whispers of Strabo and his old discovery remain devoid of underground for hundreds of years, after 1,800 years. French researcher Auguste Marat came and discovered the manuscripts of the historian Strabo, so I made him a stone statues that are similar to the statue of Abi al-Hul. Between the Temple of Luxor and the human's annihilation, it was launched along the path that the manuscript indicated until it reached an underground entrance. To discover that it was found a large stone fertility, one of them weighing 100 tons, but the surprise was not in the discovery of Sardab, but rather was in the mystery of the old Serapeum. What is Serapeum and what is the purpose of it? How were giant boxes carved and transported to underground? What is the relationship of the idols of Apis and the most important shepherd of the dead? The most important question is that all of them were empty and without masochism. We will return to you to the ancient era of ancient history. We open a strange aspect of the lost Egyptian civilization to reveal to you one of the biggest secrets. In the year 1850, the French government sent a scientific delegation to Egypt to search for some ancient monuments and manuscripts, and it was among that delegation the famous French scientist Auguste Marat, one of the first Egyptian scholars. Through his research, he found manuscripts dating back to the 1st century of birth. For the Greek historian Strabo remembers a mysterious discovery of an underground stele, so he was searching for it in the effects of Saqqara. He continued to search between antiquities for a full year on the road between the Temple of Luxor and the human's courtyard, a shepherd. An underground entrance was discovered that led the dead Sardab, which reminds the old manuscripts. To understand the mystery of Serapeum graves, we must know what is concerned with Batran Abis, in relation to the ancient pharaonic civilization. 5,000 years ago, when he gave birth to a single bull for his mother during lightning, the ancient Egyptians were looking at him at a different look. Special care is presented to him in his life and after his death. To worship you with an idol without God, just like what the children of Israel did when the Samaritan gave them the grass, and the ancient Egyptians call it the name of Abis. Where they embrace him and bury him in private cemeteries known as the Serapeum, north of the Zoser funeral complex in Egypt, in the same man. The latest discovery by Auguste Marat is a great way in the world, so imperial governments in Europe organized and financed the search for Egyptian treasures. Hundreds of tons have been looted and stolen and transferred to France and Britain, and this is still going on. After the discovery of Marit and for the past 15 years, he studied Serapeum and composed the book Asma Esraba Mingle, in the French language, and he did not translate into any other language. Despite the lack of books and sources that talk about this discovery, which increased the matter strange and miserable. After showing you the meaning of concrete and the story of its discovery, we enter into its deep narration to dive into the largest puzzles of the Egyptians under the ground. Sardab el-Daman is located in Apis under the disadvantages of Abis, and upon entering it, we find that it is made up of a large exhibition and another small that opened the major corridors under the ground during the era of your first name. That is, he only used it without building. The large exhibition spanned straight corridors for more than 300 meters combined, consisting of 20-4 stone graves carved from Chonnet, Sianet and Dirit. It is a very hard stones that requires it today. Steel pamphlets equipped with diamond heads. The weight of the cover of those graves is only 30 tons, while the weight of the stone grave reaches 70 tons, distributed in a row, and the small exhibition was used during the reign of King Ramses II. It contains 17 rooms carved in the rock. Marit mentioned in his book that when he entered Sardab the dead, without any trace of a miracle or to Apis, I believe in the beginning of the matter, it was stolen, and by inspecting the rest. So he made it with the workers, or even the cover of the cover was shook, but they could not use the dynamite and detonate a part of the cover that weighs 30 tons. To discover after his sari, he is also. He then moved to the minor hall and discovered there are mothers of human beings and calves, so he mentioned on the 58th page of his book and said, we found a coffin of wood that was shattered in the upper part. But the humanity of all funerary decrees did not touch, and it bears the name of the prince, the mayor of Ibn Ramses II, and the contents of the grave were completely transferred to the Louvre Museum in France. She closed the minimum hall and prevented anyone from visiting it. The question that arises immediately and without thinking, what was all the stone graves in the major hall empty? If we take the story of Marit that she stole a signing here at a crossroad, and the fabrication of that story to remove any charge or investigation of thinking logically, we find that all the two hypotheses are not convincing. If we assume that it was stolen by the sake of the Saxes, when they only stole the Great Hall and left the minorly golden gold. Also, if Marit was the perpetrator, it would be easy for him to claim the same matter in the small hall and empty it from the contents without anyone feeling what then left her teeming with treasures. This is first, and secondly, in the 20-4 graves in the Great Hall, Marit found one grave closed. And he stolen him with the dummy when the graves thieves did not open it and stole it as they did in the rest. So the logical answer is that the stone graves were in this way from eternity and did not steal or touch, as the researchers believed. Here, a greater mystery is born about the goal of these graves and the truth of their construction, and when they made this large and engineering. The puzzle of Serapeum begins in how to build the underground, as we find the entrance to the grave with 320 centimeters. That is, it only accommodates the grave longitudinally, and from the inside it takes a long and extended shape, and it is in itself a confusing. For the sake of drilling such a narration, and with that accuracy, we need modern tunnel drilling machines, so how did the ancient Egyptians be able to dig them in this equal way? Once the graves reach, we find that its place is very narrow, which makes us ask another question: how it was transferred and placed in its place with this huge size and the narrow place. The introduction of one stone grave with a weight of 100 tons needs 500 workers if we assume that each worker withdraws 200 kilograms and also the presence of 500 people in a narrow place. They carry firefighters to see, and that dark narration leads to suffocation due to burning oxygen and makes the process of moving and withdrawing is impossible. How were they able to enter 20-4 giant graves in this place? Looking at the place where the stitches were placed, we find it low from the surface of the earth. This makes it impossible for anyone to put it in this place. The space is only enough for a few people. Assuming that the grave room accommodates 10 people and weighs the grave 100 tons, or 100,000 kilograms. Is it a stronghold for a person to move or bear the weight of 10,000 kilograms? This is impossible, so some people go to assume that these stages were transferred by the giants. It is an unacceptable assumption because this narration is away and does not accommodate them. This assumption cannot be applied here because of the narrow place and closed stone, and here we find ourselves unable to explain the transfer of these giant boxes inside the terrifying narration. We have not yet understood how it was made and what was aimed at it, and when the ancient Egyptians carried that hardship and then left empty. At a time when the media sheds light on the pyramids and civilization above the ground, the mention of Serapeum is hidden under it, despite being a larger brink of Egyptian civilization above the earth. Because of these complex matters, many researchers and scholars believe that a strange technique was present for the ancient Egyptians, the researcher Christopher Dawn in his book Missing Technology in Egyptian Civilization mentioned. It is a book that carried a lot of evidence and proofs on the existence of technology thousands of years ago and in a way that humanity has not known before. When some hear this book, he thinks that it contains the stories of aliens and strange creatures, which is completely wrong. Christopher relied on a field called engineering accuracy in the interpretation of Egyptian civilization and mentioned that the ancient Egyptians used a high development technique in engineering and construction. This is through calculating the ribs, so that it can get a 90-degree existing angle that requires high standards. Because simple tools do not give the required accuracy 100%, so Christopher measures the treatment of the ceiling of the grave in the canabium and the degree of its application to the pregnant woman. He found that it is completely applied to the point that it is not allowed to enter the light, and this indicates that these boxes were suffered with professional tools. It is known that cutting the stone with this hardness may lead to a slight deviation on the length or width, but the angle was indicating 90 degrees completely without any decimal breaks. This made researchers completely sure that these stones were never cut in primitive ways. In comparison with one of the graves discovered from later eras, we find that they are not disciplined and zigzag, which makes the matter of its sculpture in primitive ways as possible. But the graves of Serapeum and with that great engineering accuracy can only be carved with very sophisticated tools. Christopher says in his book that he sent his studies on the graves of Serapeum to 4 giant cutting factories in America. They all emphasize the impossibility of creating these graves with primitive matters. A technique cannot imagine its bone and the wondrous thing where it suddenly disappeared from existence. After an in-depth study of Serapeum, we find that the theory of its construction for the sake The most important of them, if they were really, where are the funerary inscriptions on them? Looking at the apparent inscriptions, we find that they were carved after successive eras. This is shown by weak sculpture compared to the accuracy of the design. Is it reasonable that he who designed that engineering does this weak sculpture? And also, when it was built with a length of 4 meters and a height of 330 centimeters, i.e. 4 times larger than the calf, and if it is actually to the bulls, will it be built with accuracy higher than the accuracy of royal graves? The initial answer to this puzzle is that the stabulum bench. On the first look, we find that it is in different sizes and multiple stones, and it is noted that the accuracy of the sculpture appears from the inside only. Contrary to its appearance, as the abroad notes the needs and not to fall. Also, given the walls of the boxes, we find that they are very thick and sculpted from one piece with a cover that weighs 30 tons, and that data indicates a certain matter. That these boxes were designed to withstand high pressure, then the tip of the thread in the Serapeum boxes, that they are designed to withstand high pressure, so what is the purpose of that? Some think that it was like batteries to generate electricity, as it needs great pressure and endurance. There are many evidences that prove that the ancient Egyptians knew the old electricity, through their inscriptions, but this theory is invalidated by something noticed by Egyptian scientists. Some of these boxes inside were roughly, and this indicates that they are incomplete, so what made the ancient Egyptians suddenly stand from work? And when the one who came after them came from its sculpture and refining this matter, it indicates a result that may be terrifying. It is that there is a strange matter that led to a collective courtyard to build the first civilization. After them, the pharaohs came as disasters for that civilization. They only engraved their names and achievements, and this explains the presence of ultra-engineering constructions and implicit implications. The Egyptians who built the ancient Egyptian civilization were a people who preceded the pharaohs with a great deal of them, and all of them were destroyed. With the entire advanced technology they possessed, which may be based on a technique that we have not reached today, so that the Canabium funds remain a mystery of the largest mysteries of the first Egyptian civilization. And buried underground.